NBC released the results of a poll this week that showed that AI is less popular than Donald Trump and ICE. In fact, the only categories that it beat on net positivity were the Democratic Party and Iran. Fear around AI is everywhere. Just this week, Atlassian, another major tech company, laid off 10% of its workforce, and multiple anonymous sources inside Meta leaked that the company is planning up to 20% layoffs. And the reasons they cited were to offset the cost of massive AI infrastructure spending, as well as making way for AI efficiency. Literally putting the money they could have paid those employees where their mouth is regarding claims that AI will replace human work. Amidst this depressing haze of doom and gloom caused by the most turbulent technology of this century to date, it's easy to let fear encompass you, especially if you work from a computer. But sticking one's head in the sand has only ever been beneficial for long-billed shorebirds and walruses, and you possess neither beak nor tusks, so knock it off. The truth is that right now is not the time to indulge in fear, and those with the courage to act despite the uncertainty are the ones that history favors. Just listen to this quote by Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor of all time. Quote, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others are fearful." This was included in a 1986 letter to shareholders and is in reference to investing, but it's as applicable to you and me as knowledge workers in 2026 as it ever has been to anyone. To be clear, Buffett is not a greedy man, and his usage of the word greedy here can better be mapped to be aggressive or proactive when others are fearful. But semantics aside, to understand the reason why we need this attitude now more than ever, we first need to travel back in time to 16th century France to tell the remarkable story of a man named Ambrose Paré and the now extinct profession of the barber surgeon. Ambrose was born around 1510 in a rural French village called Laval. His family were working class, filled with tradesmen, which means he was entirely locked out of the elite medical universities. But he had an interest nonetheless, so instead of learning from academic scholars, he actually learned the grueling, hands-on trade of the barber surgeon by apprenticing under his brother. But what exactly is a barber surgeon? Just like it sounds, in 1510, if you needed a haircut, or a tooth pulled, or a shoulder popped back into place, or a leg amputated, you went to the same guy. There were no specialized clinics for the working class. The barber surgeon was your chiropractor, your dentist, and your family practice doctor all rolled into one, who also cut hair and shaved beards. In fact, the red and white spirals that you see outside of barbershops today are actually a nod to the blood-stained bandages that the original barbers would wrap around poles outside of their shops to dry after surgeries. The university-educated, long-robe physicians of the day thought they were completely above touching blood or treating the sick. So the messy, brutal reality of keeping everyday people alive fell to these blue-collar tradesmen. But Ambrose wasn't just your run-of-the-mill barber surgeon. He abandoned his apprenticeship with his brother early and spent 3 years at the Hôtel Dieu in Paris, which is literally translated the Hostel of God, which is where the sickest and the poorest went for medical care. These large stone buildings were actually run by the Catholic Church, and they were often very overcrowded. Exhausted but determined, nuns and barber surgeons and other employees worked tirelessly, serving in dangerous conditions of squalor where patients often had to lay crammed side by side on large benches together. Everyone present was constantly putting themselves at risk of contracting diseases like tuberculosis or plague. It was this relentless repetition and volume that prepared Ambrose for what he would do next, when he enlisted as a battlefield surgeon in the French army. When he enlisted in the late 1530s, firearms were still a relatively new technology. The accepted academic best practice of the day dictated that gunpowder was inherently poisonous. So elite physicians mandated that all open gunshot wounds were treated by pouring boiling elderberry oil directly into the wounds, thinking that they were neutralizing the poison. After a particularly massive battle, Paré was treating a flood of casualties, and he literally ran out of boiling oil. Panicking, he improvised. He mixed a cool, soothing balm of egg yolk, rose oil, and turpentine, and applied it to the remaining soldiers. He wrote that he could barely sleep that night, terrified that the men he treated with the expert boiling oil would be dead by morning. But when the sun came up, the battlefield revealed something that would permanently alter the trajectory of his life and its impact on the world. The men treated with the experimental concoction were resting soundly. Those who had had boiling oil poured into open gunshot wounds were still in excruciating agony. Go figure. With this single observation, Ambrose realized that the experts were dead wrong. Gunpowder was not poisonous. The accepted best practice was literally killing people. But a single breakthrough on a battlefield does not immediately change an entrenched system. The long-robe physicians didn't just throw away their oil and applaud the uneducated barber. They fought him fiercely. The dean of the medical faculty in Paris publicly attacked Ambrose and his methods for decades, desperately trying to protect the elite academic monopoly. Ambrose didn't care. He knew he couldn't win the elite theoretical debate against the establishment. So he did something radical. In 1514, he wrote down his exact methods and published them in French. For context, every reputable academic document of the day was written in Latin, no exceptions. So this was a big deal. He bypassed the academic gatekeepers and entirely open sourced his findings directly to the blue-collar barber surgeons of the front lines. The new method spread like wildfire amongst his peers. The establishment tried to counter it, but the market always wins. The soldiers wanted the man that could keep them alive, not the one that could quote ancient texts in Greek. Ambrose's undeniable results eventually forced the elites to concede, and he rose to become the official surgeon of 4 French kings. But what does that have to do with being a knowledge worker in 2026? And what does it have to do with Warren Buffett's mandate to be greedy, proactive, when everyone else is screaming we're cooked from the rooftops? The lesson is in the way technology matures. The reason that barbers and surgeons were originally rolled up into the same profession is because there wasn't that much to know about surgery at that time. So you could be a jack of all trades. Today, the American College of Surgeons recognizes 14 different surgical specialties. That level of specialization would have seemed ridiculously narrow to a barber surgeon. But just because their knowledge of anatomy and biology was limited doesn't mean what they did was easy to learn. To become a master barber surgeon, the apprentice had to endure 7 long years of brutal on-the-job training, which ranged from pulling teeth to holding down screaming patients to popping shoulders back into place, and even minor surgeries. Because they were getting their hands dirty, what they lacked in deep knowledge, they made up for with deep intuition and repetition. Consequently, some of the greatest innovations of the day came from the bottom up instead of from the ivory tower intellectuals who dealt mostly in theory. In fact, Ambrose Paré is credited with being one of the first people to deploy the scientific method. Not out of curiosity, but because people were dying and it was his responsibility to minimize that count as much as possible. That type of responsibility breeds a deep desire for improvement of outcome that the long-robe surgeons couldn't recreate from theory. Right now, AI is in the barber surgeon phase. The org chart of a company is collapsing, and CEOs are announcing layoffs because of the belief that one person can replace the job of many as long as they're aided by AI. This is the rise of the AI generalist, and it's because proponents argue that AI can handle everything or soon will be able to. This is the main driver of AI-related layoffs, and it's a myopic point of view resulting from ignoring the presence of unknown unknowns, aka the things we don't even think to question. Most people are still unsure of what to use AI for outside of summarizing documents. I consider myself a power user of AI, and even I sometimes question if AI is just making things faster as opposed to truly better. But I'm slowly becoming convinced of the latter the more my experience grows. And that is the key. It's the power users over time who are going to be the ones having aha moments because they're the ones actually getting their hands dirty with the technology. And pretty soon they start to saturate the known knowns, which is effectively the shallow end. And then they start specializing into specific areas of focus, and others follow them, giving rise to entirely new domains. This is already taking place, with early examples being people who have abandoned the generic term of prompt engineer and instead moved into context engineer or even intent engineers, or people that build context layers so that AI's memory can improve. In fact, some companies have teams of software engineers whose entire job is just to build and maintain skills for these new AI agents to get better. Every couple of months, there's probably going to be new roles and domains that emerge that right now seem overly niche. But if you don't get your hands dirty, you'll miss these aha moments. And when the day comes when fear turns to greed, which it will, you'll find yourself on your heels. So get busy and don't let fear paralyze you. See you next week.